Beautiful car, right? Though I'll be honest with you, it's a bit out of reach for most folks. Maybe there's something a little more practical I can show you?
I'm here for this one.
Sure, but it's a six-figure sticker before tax. You understand what I'm saying?
I do, and so does my bank. Go ahead and write it up.
There's a short video circulating online that on its surface looks almost mundane. It takes place inside a car dealership. The lighting is bright, the floors are polished, and a luxury vehicle sits on display like a trophy. Clean lines, flawless paint, the kind of car designed to signal success before it even moves. A white car salesman stands beside the vehicle. A black man stands across from him. The exchange between them is brief but loaded. The salesman gestures toward the car and says, "A beautiful car, right? Though I'll be honest with you, it's a bit out of reach for most folks. Maybe there's something a bit more practical I can show you." The black man replies calmly, "I'm here for this one." The salesman presses again. "Sure, but it's a six-figure sticker before tax. Do you understand what I'm saying?" The response is immediate and controlled. "I do, and so does my bank. Go ahead and write it up." The salesman pauses. And then the video cuts off. No shouting, no slurs, no dramatic confrontation, just a moment of awkward silence that says far more than words ever could. This video has spread rapidly, not because it's shocking in a loud way, but because it's painfully familiar to a lot of people, especially black viewers. It captures something subtle, something systemic, something that doesn't always leave evidence behind, but shapes real experiences every day. The assumption that a black man does not belong in a space associated with wealth. This essay isn't just about one salesman. It's about why moments like this happen at all, why they keep happening, and why they aren't accidents. The assumption that speaks before the person does. What's important to understand first is that the salesman never explicitly says, "You can't afford this because you're black." That's not how most modern racism operates. Instead, he uses coded language, out of reach for most folks. Something more practical. Do you understand what I'm saying? These phrases are not neutral. They're doing social work. They're a way of testing whether someone belongs without ever having to name race out loud. And here's the key detail. The salesman makes these assumptions before asking any qualifying questions. He doesn't ask about financing. He doesn't ask about credit. He doesn't ask if the buyer's paying cash. He doesn't ask anything at all that would actually determine affordability. The decision is already made. That decision is based on perception, not information. And perception, in this case, is racialized. Why this moment resonates so widely? Videos like this go viral because they confirm something many black people already know from lived experience. Whether it's in car dealerships, luxury stores, banks, or real estate offices, there's a recurring pattern. Black customers are treated as potential risks rather than potential clients. This is not anecdotal. Numerous studies have shown that black shoppers are more likely to be followed in stores, questioned about their ability to pay, or offered fewer options than white shoppers with similar financial profiles. In the auto industry specifically, research has found that black buyers are often quoted higher interest rates, offered worse financing terms, assumed to need subprime loans, directed toward cheaper vehicles regardless of stated interest. So when viewers watch this salesman hesitate, stumble, and ultimately fall silent, they're not just reacting to one awkward interaction. They're reacting to a pattern that has existed for decades. The myth of rational bias. A common defense people raise in situations like this is that the salesman is just being practical or realistic. They argue that salespeople are trained to qualify customers and avoid wasting time. But here's the problem with that argument. Real qualification involves asking questions, not making assumptions. If the salesman truly cared about efficiency, the conversation would have gone differently. He might have said, "Great choice. Are you planning to finance or pay cash?" Or, "Let's talk numbers and see what works best for you." Instead, he attempted to redirect the customer away from the car entirely. That's not efficiency. That's gatekeeping. And when gatekeeping consistently targets the same groups, it stops being coincidence and starts being discrimination. Where these assumptions come from. To understand why some white men like the salesman in this video assume a black man can't afford a luxury car, we have to zoom out. This behavior doesn't come from nowhere. It's the result of historical, cultural, and systemic forces that have shaped how wealth and race are perceived in America. A brief history of race and wealth in the U.S. For most of American history, black people were intentionally excluded from wealth-building opportunities. After slavery ended, black Americans were promised land, resources, and a chance to build generational wealth. Those promises were broken. Instead, systems like sharecropping, convict leasing, and Jim Crow laws ensured that black labor continued to benefit white wealth. In the 20th century, discriminatory housing policies like redlining prevented black families from buying homes in neighborhoods that appreciated in value. Banks denied mortgages. The GI Bill was administered in racially biased ways. Suburbanization was largely a whites-only wealth project. Homeownership is the single largest driver of generational wealth in the United States. When black Americans were locked out of it for decades, the consequences didn't disappear, they compounded. Even today, the median white family holds significantly more wealth than the median black family, not because of effort or intelligence, but because of access. Yet the salesman in the video doesn't see history. He sees a stereotype, stereotypes as shortcuts. Racism often operates as a mental shortcut. Instead of evaluating an individual, the brain reaches for a narrative it already recognizes. In American culture, blackness has long been associated with poverty, criminality, financial instability, dependency. These associations are reinforced by media, politics, and selective storytelling. We see endless images of black suffering, but far fewer images of black success, especially understated, everyday success. So when a black man walks into a luxury car dealership, it creates cognitive dissonance for someone who has internalized these narratives. The salesman resolves that discomfort not by questioning the stereotype, but by questioning the customer. Respectability politics won't save you. One of the most frustrating aspects of videos like this is that the black man does everything right. He's calm, polite, direct, well-spoken, confident. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't posture. He doesn't challenge the salesman aggressively, and it still doesn't matter. This exposes a harsh truth. Racism is not a reaction to behavior. It's a precondition. No amount of professionalism can fully protect someone from being profiled when the profiling is visual and immediate. Why luxury spaces are especially racialized. Luxury spaces, high-end dealerships, boutiques, private clubs are not just about products. They're about identity. Luxury sells the idea of exclusivity. And in Western culture, exclusivity has historically meant whiteness. Even as black wealth has grown, the image of the default luxury consumer remains white. Anyone outside that image is treated as an exception that must prove themselves. That's why the salesman feels entitled to challenge the black customer's presence. He sees himself not just as a seller, but as a gatekeeper of who belongs. The silence at the end of the video. The most revealing moment in the video isn't what's said, it's what isn't. When the black man says, "I do, and so does my bank, go ahead and write it up," the salesman has no script left. His assumptions collapse in real time. That is the sound of a worldview short-circuiting. It's the sound of someone realizing too late that they misjudged the situation and that their bias has just been exposed. And then the video cuts. That cut is powerful because it mirrors real life. There's rarely closure in moments like this. No apology, no lesson learned on camera, just an uncomfortable pause and the hope that the moment might linger. Why this isn't just about hurt feelings. Some people dismiss moments like this as minor or overblown. They argue that no one was explicitly insulted, so no real harm was done. But harm isn't always loud. Being repeatedly questioned, doubted, or redirected takes a toll. It communicates over time that you are out of place, that your presence is suspicious, that your success is unexpected, that psychological burden is part of systemic racism. And when it happens in financial spaces, banks, dealerships, housing markets, it has material consequences. It shapes access, opportunity, and outcomes. The bigger picture. This video resonates because it captures racism in its modern form. Subtle, deniable, and deeply embedded. No slurs are needed. No overt hostility. Just a raised eyebrow, a helpful suggestion, and a refusal to take someone at their word. And until these assumptions are confronted, not just individually, but structurally, videos like this will keep circulating. not because people enjoy outrage, but because they recognize truth, implicit bias, and the split-second decision. One of the most important concepts to understand in moments like this is implicit bias, the subconscious associations people carry, often without realizing it. Implicit bias operates faster than conscious thought. Studies using eye tracking and reaction time tests show that people make judgments about trustworthiness, competence, and wealth within milliseconds of seeing someone. These judgments are not the result of reasoned analysis. They are the result of conditioning. The salesman in this video likely did not sit there and consciously decide, "I believe black men cannot afford expensive cars." Instead, his brain filled in gaps automatically. Before the customer spoke, before finances were discussed, before any paperwork existed, the assumption was already active. This is why implicit bias is so difficult to confront. People defend themselves by saying, "I didn't mean anything by it," or "I treat everyone the same." But impact doesn't require intent. Systems don't wait for malice. And in industries where snap judgments affect access, like sales, lending, housing, and healthcare, implicit bias becomes a gatekeeping mechanism. Sales culture and who gets taken seriously. Car sales operate on incentives. Salespeople are trained to prioritize buyers they believe will close quickly, avoid time wasters, read customers based on appearance and demeanor. The problem is that these heuristics are not neutral. They rely heavily on stereotypes. A white man in casual clothing may be read as eccentric but wealthy. A black man in similar clothing is more likely to be read as unqualified or aspirational. The same cues are interpreted differently based on race. This creates a self-fulfilling cycle. Black customers are taken less seriously. They receive worse service. They disengage or walk away. Salespeople confirm their original bias. In the video, the salesman attempts to redirect the customer away from the high-end car before any financial conversation occurs. That tells us something critical. This wasn't about protecting the customer from a bad decision. It was about protecting the salesman from perceived embarrassment, of assuming someone belonged when he thought they didn't. Respectability isn't a requirement for dignity. There's another uncomfortable layer here, the expectation that black people must perform competence to earn baseline respect. Notice how the black man in the video speaks. His tone is calm. His words are precise. He references his bank. He doesn't over-explain, but he makes his financial legitimacy explicit. This is not accidental. Many black professionals learn early that ambiguity invites suspicion. Confidence must be unmistakable. Calm must be maintained. Emotion must be regulated. And yet, even with all of that, the salesman still hesitates. This exposes the limits of respectability politics. The idea that racism can be avoided if one just speaks correctly, dresses correctly, or behaves correctly falls apart in moments like this, because the judgment happened before behavior entered the equation. Microaggressions as economic barriers. What happens in this video is a microaggression, but that term often undersells the damage. Microaggressions are not just social slights. When they occur in financial spaces, they become economic barriers. Being subtly discouraged from applying for a loan, touring a property, test driving a car, speaking with a financial advisor has real consequences over time. Even when a transaction eventually goes through, the emotional labor required to push past skepticism adds friction. That friction accumulates. It shapes where people choose to shop, invest, and engage. The salesman's hesitation is not neutral. It's part of a larger pattern that quietly shapes economic outcomes. The legal line and why this still happens. Legally speaking, discrimination in sales based on race is prohibited. In theory, a customer cannot be denied service or treated differently because of their race. But the key phrase is in theory. Modern discrimination rarely looks like outright refusal. It looks like delays, redirection, extra scrutiny, different tones of voice, subtle discouragement. These behaviors are incredibly difficult to prove in court. There's rarely a paper trail. There's rarely a witness willing to testify. And there's almost never an explicit statement of bias. This is why discrimination persists even under anti-discrimination laws. The system punishes obvious violations, but struggles to address the quiet ones. Why the video cuts off and why that matters. The video ending abruptly is not just a stylistic choice. It mirrors how these moments often end in real life. There's no resolution, no apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing. The burden is placed on the person who was doubted to decide whether to push forward anyway, educate the offender, walk away, internalize the moment, and move on. The salesman, meanwhile, is afforded ambiguity. He can tell himself a story where nothing racist happened, where he was just doing his job, where the discomfort fades quickly. That imbalance between who carries the weight of the moment and who gets to forget it is central to how systemic racism operates. Comment sections as a second battlefield. When videos like this circulate online, the discrimination doesn't stop at the dealership. It moves into the comment section. Predictably, responses fall into patterns. People who immediately recognize the racism, people who deny it outright, people who demand more context, people who blame the black man for being too sensitive. What's revealing is how often defenders of the salesman insist on alternative explanations that ignore probability. They'll argue that the salesman treats everyone that way, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary in similar cases. This reflex to defend the benefit of the doubt for white offenders while denying it to black victims is itself a racialized pattern. Algorithms and the commodification of racism. There's also a media layer to consider. Platforms reward engagement, and outrage generates engagement. Videos depicting racism often go viral not because people enjoy them, but because they provoke emotional responses. This creates a troubling dynamic where racial harm becomes content. That doesn't mean these videos shouldn't be shared. Exposure matters. Accountability matters. But it does mean we should be conscious of how often black pain becomes a spectacle rather than a catalyst for change. The goal shouldn't be endless circulation of the same pattern. It should be interruption. What accountability could look like. So what should happen after a moment like this? Accountability doesn't have to mean public shaming. It can include mandatory bias training tied to real consequences, clear dealership policies about qualifying customers, mystery shopper programs that test racial equity, transparent complaint processes that protect customers. Most importantly, it requires acknowledging that bias exists even when it's uncomfortable to admit. Denying the problem ensures its survival. Why this moment is bigger than a car sale. At its core, this video isn't about luxury cars. It's about belonging. Who is assumed to belong in spaces of wealth? Who is treated as an anomaly? Who is asked to justify their presence? These questions don't just apply to dealerships. They apply to boardrooms, neighborhoods, classrooms, and hospitals. The hesitation we see from the salesman is the same hesitation black people encounter in countless spaces, sometimes subtle, sometimes overt, always consequential. Closing reflection. When the salesman says, "Do you understand what I'm saying?" he believes he's clarifying a price, but what he's really doing is testing legitimacy. And when the black man responds, "So does my bank," he's not just answering a question. He's rejecting a narrative that was imposed on him before he spoke. That's why the moment lands so hard, because it exposes how little has changed and how much still needs to. What makes this video linger isn't the silence at the end, it's the recognition. Most people watching don't see a shocking anomaly. They see a moment they've witnessed, experienced, or benefited from without noticing. Because this isn't just about one salesman, it's about how quickly assumptions are made, how rarely they're questioned, and how often the burden of proof is placed on the same people over and over again. So the real question isn't whether the black man could afford the car. It's why he had to prove it before being taken seriously. And maybe the most important question of all is this. How many times have moments like this gone unrecorded? And how often do we excuse them when they do? That discomfort you feel watching this clip, that's not outrage bait. That's recognition. And what we do with that recognition, whether we dismiss it, debate it, or actually challenge it, is where change either begins or quietly stops.